Good evening. I'm Brad Cantrell. I'm the Vice Chair of the Planning Commission. I'm going to be calling the Planning Commission meeting to order of May 9th, 2022. We do have a quorum present. To start the meeting, we're going to have some opening remarks by the city's technical facilitator. Go ahead.
All right, welcome to our virtual Planning Commission meeting. We're going to cover a few basic items before beginning. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. To members and city staff, members, if you are able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you are able, please activate your video when you are speaking. Use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions. Staff, click raise hand when you are asked a question. The chair will do their best to call on committee members in the order in which their hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak. The name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the commission, please send it to the email listed in today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jesse. The first item of business is public comment. Heather, do we have any individuals listed for public comment?
We do not.
Thank you. The next item is communications, disclosures, and recusals. Do any members of the body have any communications, disclosures, or recusals? If so, raise your hand. Seeing no raised hands, the next item is minutes of the April 25th, 2022 regular meeting. Are there any suggested changes to the minutes? If not, do I have a motion to approve? Motion to approve by Commissioner Shepard. Do we have a second? Second by Commissioner Fernandez. Unless I see a raised hand to object, I'll assume unanimous consent. I see no raised hands, so the motions are approved unanimously. The next item is the schedule of meetings. Our regular meetings include May 23rd, June 13th, and June 27th. We have a special working session on Thursday, June 23rd at 5 p.m. Moving on to the agenda, under public hearings, we have several items on consent. And the consent agenda, it's a custom of the Planning Commission to remove from the agenda those items which first, the staff believes that the application has had sufficient review by and warrants approval with all the conditions placed on it by the various city departments. The applicant has accepted all those conditions, and there are no individuals who have registered to speak in opposition of those items tonight. Those items are placed on the consent agenda, which is addressed at the beginning of the meeting, so that members of the public associated with those items can zoom out if they choose. Also, if there's any item that the commission would like to separate from the consent agenda, we'll pull those off and then review those in the course of the meeting. Items on the consent agenda include, and I'm going to also include the referral items. We have consent item 2, referral items 3, 4, and 5 to the May 23rd meeting, and consent items 6 and 8. Do any of the commission members wish to separate any of those items? If so, raise your hand. Seeing no raised hands, I'll go through the consent agenda. Item number 2, I'll open the public hearing. Item number 2, Legislature 70956, substitute creating section 1501, paren 629 of the Madison General Ordinances entitled City Boundaries, and beginning part of chapter entitled Alder Districts and Wards, attaching to 20th Alder District, the property located at 3262 High Point Road in the town of Middleton, amending section 15.02, paren 140 of the Madison General Ordinances to attach the property to Ward 140 and assigning the permanent zoning classification of suburban residential consistent district. Items 3, 4, and 5 are being referred at the request of the applicant to the May 23rd, 2022 meeting. Item 3 is Legislature 70539. Item number 4 is Legislature 70540. And item number 5 is 70560, all of which affect properties at 519 to 547 West Washington Avenue. Consent item number 6 is Legislature 70541, 710 John Nolan Drive, 14th Alder District, consideration of a conditional use in the suburban employment district for a restaurant tavern in Urban Design District 1. And lastly, on the consent is item number 8, Legislature 70748, 1701 Moreland Road, 14th Alder District, consideration of a conditional use in Industrial Limited District, zoning to convert a restaurant tavern to a restaurant nightclub. Again, I've opened the public hearing. I'll close the public hearing since we have no registrants in opposition, and I'll be looking for a motion. Motion by Commissioner Shepard. Commissioner Shepard, would you like to make the motion?
Sure. Move that the Plan Commission approve the consent agenda to include the referrals.
And okay, and the consent items too. Do we have a second? Second by Commissioner Fernandez. Although I'll assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand in opposition. The motion is approved unanimously. The last item on the agenda and public hearing is item number 7, Legislature 70727, 114 North Blount Street, 6th Alder District, consideration of a demolition permit to demolish a single-family residence. We will have, first of all, a presentation by city staff, and it's Chris Wells, I believe. Chris, can you raise your hand? Okay, go ahead, Chris.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Chair and members of the Plan Commission. The applicant is seeking a demolition permit to demolish a 2-story residence at 114 North Blount Street. According to city historical records, the building was known as the Ida Carmichael residence and was moved to the subject site around 1923. It is one of 3 contributing structures which make up the East Dayton Street National Historic District. The 2 others being the Hill Grocery and Residence at 120 North Blount Street and the Miller House at 647 East Dayton Street, both of which have been designated as Madison landmarks. These 3 structures are historically significant as they were part of the first African-American neighborhood in Madison. The applicant, who purchased the property in December of 2021, has provided a detailed assessment of several concerns related to the building's deteriorated condition. However, the Landmarks Commission has recommended that the building was found to have historic value based on its status as a contributing structure as a contributing structure in a National Register Historic District, and its significant role in the African American settlement of Madison and Wisconsin. Furthermore, The demolition also appears inconsistent with specific recommendation not to raise this building in the Tenny Lapham neighborhood plan. Therefore, staff raised concerns of being able to find the approval standards for demolition permits met. Several public comments have been submitted regarding this request, including a few since the staff report was finalized last Friday. All are in opposition and all have been attached to the public record. If the Plan Commission concurs with the findings of the Plan Commission and finds that demolition permit approval standards number 4 and number 7 or others are not met, the Plan Commission should place this item on file without prejudice. Staff note that the Commission must provide findings of fact listing the standards that have not been met and the reasons the standards were not met. In the alternative, if the Plan Commission finds that the proposal meets the approval standards, it should approve this requested demolition permit. This recommendation is subject to the input at this public hearing and comments and conditions recommended by reviewing agencies. I would be happy to answer questions after the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. We will open the public hearing. Our first speaker is Gregory Worth on Troy Drive in Madison in support, and I believe he's the applicant in this case. Gregory, you have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
All right. I am here to seek a demolition permit for this building at 114 North Blount Street, as it has unfortunately passed beyond a possible restoration. This decision to seek demolition has not been made lightly. Saving old homes is something I have dedicated my entire adult life to, and my specialty is performing complete restorations of neglected homes from the 1800s, and it is something that I care deeply about. This one seemed like a perfect candidate, but I could have never foreseen the insurmountable issues that were hidden behind the plaster in this building. As the zoning code reads in regards to this process, I require a demolition permit in order to perform an act that destroys an existing building wall facing a public street or deconstructs or destroys 50% or more of the area of the exterior walls of a building. So the situation I find myself in is that well over 50% of the exterior walls, including the street-facing facade, cannot be brought to meet required building codes without being fully and completely deconstructed and replaced. As a citizen and a licensed contractor, I am bound by the laws set forth in the building code, and therefore I am unable to legally proceed towards the utilization of this property without first obtaining a demolition permit. As it stands, this is an unsafe structure and a health hazard to anybody in or around it. Now, unfortunately, the entire structure, beyond the exterior walls, also suffers from major structural deficiencies. Please move on to the next slide. Here I have cited the most egregious code infractions that exist in the house, but this is by no means a comprehensive list. In effect, a proper restoration would require the complete deconstruction and redesign of a majority of not only the exterior walls of the building, but the entire roof, the entire foundation, the entire framing system, both inside and out, so that by the time this building could once again meet basic living, health, safety, and structural standards, it would neither resemble nor be the original home at all. I have already spent considerable time and effort pursuing the restoration of this house and alternatives to finding a demolition permit and have been met with impossibility. I truly have no choice going forward but to obtain a demolition permit in order to proceed with my work under the confines of the law. I welcome any questions the Commission may have, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Gregory. Our next speaker is Kurt Steggy on Cambridge Road in Madison, opposed, representing the Madison Trust for Historic Preservation. Kurt, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. This is a difficult situation to talk about. I've met with Mr. Worth. He seems to be an upstanding person. He seems to be in unfortunate circumstances. Having said that, the Madison Trust for Historic Preservation believes that, as stated in the statement of purpose in 28-185 sub 1 of the Madison ordinances, the purpose of this section is therefore to ensure the preservation of historic buildings. This building has been designated or recommended as by the Landmarks Commission as having historic value based on its connection with the first settlement of Blacks in the city of Madison. And the Madison Trust for Historic Preservation Board has voted unanimously to oppose that proposed demolition because of the significance of this building. Thank you for consideration and thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. The next speaker is Bob Kleba on East Gorham Street in Madison, opposed, and representing the Tenny Lapin Neighborhood Association. Bob, you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Cantrell, commissioners, and city staff. I am the development chair for the Tenny Lapin Neighborhood Association, and I am speaking tonight on behalf of the Neighborhood Association. TLNA is against the demolition of the Carmichael House at 114 North Blount Street. The owner of the building graciously provided me, a member of the Madison Trust for Historic Preservation, and a local historian, a tour of this property earlier this year. The owner has done a very good job of presenting the issues with this building. The condition of the Carmichael House today shows how the preservation of important historic sites for some communities is not as valued as the sites of Madison's early Yankee, German, and Scandinavian residents. Most of the houses of other Black residents in this area were raised decades ago. However, as you know from the staff report, the Carmichael House is one of only 3 buildings in the East Dayton Historic District honoring the thriving African-American neighborhood from the late 19th to mid-20th centuries. The loss of this building greatly endangers the preservation of the remaining buildings, which are all important to the historic fabric of our neighborhood. The building comprising the front portion that was purchased and moved to the current location was built in the late 19th century using lower cost construction techniques for that time. The condition of the building may have reflected its purchase price and thus what was available to lower income families in Madison. Even though the Carmichael House has had several additions and modifications, it is a good example of the houses available to the Black community in Madison in the early 20th century. Because this building tells us how the Josies, a significant Wisconsin African-American family, lived in Madison and provides a window into what was available to that family over time, the Tenny Lapin Neighborhood Association is against its demolition and encourages its preservation. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Heather, are there any other registrants to speak?
There are 2 that were added just recently. Would you like for me to read them?
Yes, please.
Okay, first is Henry Doan of Spate Street in opposition.
Okay. Henry, you have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
You muted me. There's no person in attendance by that name.
Okay, the next is Joe Farchione in support of North Blount Street.
Okay, Joe, you have 3 minutes.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, okay. Sorry, I think your audio cut out on my side. I joined late, but I'm actually the neighbor that lives next to this house, and I'm in support of demolishing the house. I think the property is in a horrible condition and has not been kept up by the current owners. I would consider it a nuisance property. There's frequently people on the patio and inside doing drugs and staying there. I'm obviously open for support you guys could provide in fixing the house, but something needs to be done about it. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, we're friends. I mean, we know the person who's bought the house. I'm Jenna. I'm also a neighbor as well. We live right next door, and it's just been kind of catastrophic seeing the state that the house has been and the several break-ins that have happened and people, potentially getting into trouble and hurting themselves inside the house. And from our understanding, there is nothing that the new owner can legally do to fix it. So if we don't let him demolish this place, then it's just going to continue and more people are going to get hurt and there's going to be more and more cops coming and it's a huge neighborhood nuisance. Something has happened.
And then one last thing. When I met him originally, when he first bought the place in the fall,
Joe, your time limit is up, and
that he could fix anything.
Joe, your time limit is up. And Jenna, could you say your last name? Are you Jenna? What is your last name, Jenna? Since you spoke, can you hear me, Jenna? Okay. Well, I'm assuming Jenna is connected to the neighbor property. Heather, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. I wanted to just ask Joe and Jenna to make sure that Jenna also registers to speak after the fact. We don't have Jenna registered at this time. Joe's time wasn't yet up, so I'm sorry for that confusion. There's still a moment, 1 minute left if Joe would still like to finish those testimony.
Okay, Joe, I'll let you speak for another minute if you'd like to do that.
Joe, you are unmuted on Zoom's end, and also it appears like, yep, you are unmuted. We can't hear you if you are speaking, Joe. Maybe your headset or your microphone has a mute button or switch on it. Let's try this again. Joe?
Hello?
There we go.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Joe. I'll give you another minute.
Sorry about that. My bad. I obviously not abiding by the rules. I guess the last thing I'd like to add, not sure what you heard before, but when I originally met Ben, he's had every intention of fixing the house. He said that he could fix anything. I did not believe him, but it's unfortunate that he's in this position. And yeah, I understand that it's going to be a loss of history, but in my opinion, it seems like that history was lost long ago due to the dilapidation of the property. So that's it for me.
Okay, well, thank you, Joe. Heather, are there any other registrants?
I believe Alder Carter would like to speak.
Okay, great. Alder Carter, please go ahead.
Thank you. And let me just say that I'm looking at two different screens. That's why it looks like I'm not looking at you. And I'll apologize for my dog barking in advance. So one of the things that I wanted to really address is that this is an area where African Americans came in the early 1900s. And when you think about the number of houses that were purchased and how many we have left today, 3, it's really incredibly sad. I can tell you that the number of families who lived in this area, some of the families' offsprings are still here today. And it's so important for us to have these landmarks of the African American community because you just can't get them back when they're destroyed. I don't know exactly where you're going to end up tonight, but this is what I would say. That the Miller family, the Mitchell family, the Gothard family, the Kerr family, the Weaver family all deserve some recognition of coming here at a time where this was, as you all know, a lot of people, a lot of African Americans came from Lake Mills, from the South to Lake Mills, from Lake Mills to Madison, at a time when this place was looked at as a sanctuary for African Americans. If you decide, which I hope you don't, to approve this demolition, I would hope that we would be able to have a plaque on whatever is built that signifies the history of this place. It is so important to the African American community. In addition to the Carmichael House, many people, although we're not talking about that tonight, many folks used to shop at the Hills grocery store because that was the grocery store you went to get food that now we call soul food. In my grandparents' day, it was just called good food. So that's where you went to get the items that you're so used to, that you grew up with down south. I would hope that we would be able to really look at this property and save 3 locations. That's all we have left is 3 locations. Many of the houses were not looked at as being worth saving, and that is why we are down to 3. I would hope that there be some kind of stipulation, that there be some kind of plaque recognizing the importance of this property. Thank you very much. And my dog didn't bark. Yay!
Thank you, Alder Carter. Heather, are there any other registrants that wish to speak?
We do have Henry Doane, which was called on earlier, that wasn't in attendance, that is now in attendance.
Okay. Henry, you have 3 minutes. Please go ahead.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Thanks. I think that this is an important historic property, and it really should be looked at very carefully. We've all heard its connection to the Black community, but also in landmarks in general, without any advocacy from the city or landmarks, or then a lack of political will to do anything about any of these potential landmarks until it's almost too late. It's kind of up to the Plan Commission to make these decisions now, because landmarks really doesn't have the political muscle anymore. It's mostly up to the City Council and the Plan Commission, and you're sort of the backstop to this. And I'd really like to see more, being that it's sort of up to like a few private citizens to even say anything about any of these properties. It'd be nice if there was some more advocacy in the city itself. And the Plan Commission, by default, is almost becoming the Landmarks Commission. And I really think you need to focus more on some of these properties, knowing that there's a big gap in the city right now and in the community for any kind of protections. So much has been torn down in the last couple weeks, and more is slated to come down very soon. I really think we should, put the brakes on some of this stuff. And I really think this is a property that really needs to be saved. It's a small building. I don't think it would cost too much to stabilize. All gut jobs are expensive renovations. And I really think we should look at everything very carefully at this point. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. Heather, are there any other speakers, registrants?
No, there aren't.
Okay. Are there any questions by the commission to the registrants that have spoken here? Yes, Commissioner Fernandez.
Thank you, Chair Cantrell. This question is for Kurt Steggy, please.
Okay.
And, you know, preservation is not a passive term, right? Just if we do nothing, it's the world will eventually send this thing to the earth. What is the path for preservation? Is there a group that might step forward and fund the restoration of this building? A group of philanthropists or historical buffs? I mean, what would be the path for restoration here, other than simply requiring the potential homeowner to do something that does not seem practical from a homeowner standpoint?
Yes, Kurt, can you answer?
I don't know if I can answer. I can respond. I'd like to be able to say that there are sources out there that would open pockets and create the conditions necessary for people to come together and work on not only this property within this historic district, but the adjacent property, the Hill Home and Grocery, which are also very much in need of care. The residents in these properties have been unable for many years to carry out the necessary upkeep and care for these buildings. I would say this is not a new situation. It requires a recognition by people who have means and interest, and it's an effort that is beyond. And I hate to say it, but it's beyond the capability of the Madison Trust for Historic Preservation to do on its own. I believe that the trust, although I can't speak for the trust, on this topic, I believe that the trust would be quite interested in working with others to try to pull those resources together. And save this structure and take action, preventative action to protect the other adjacent building as well. These have huge stories to tell about the Black community arriving in Madison, being unable to purchase or rent a building due to discrimination. And then the only option available was to move a building that was going to be torn down elsewhere in the city into what was a marsh. One of what started out as a marsh in Madison. Obviously, one of the least desirable places to build a community. Yet the Black community was successful. They created institutions that helped each other and allowed, and these few buildings are all that remain of it. So it warrants an incredible effort by the city and the citizens of the city. Where that effort can come from, the advocacy committee within the trust has made contacts in an effort to try to resolve this. Those contacts have not reached a point that suggests there's near-term prospects. That's about all I think I could say. But
Thank you. I appreciate it. That was.
Commissioner Fernandez, do you have any follow-up questions?
Not of Mr. Steggy, but if I may, I'd like to ask a question of Alder Carter, whether
Sure.
she is aware, certainly being an alder, is there any avenue here for city funding, either for the preservation or for some appropriate documentation, plaque, something like that? I mean, I'm utterly convinced of the historic value of this, but I'm having trouble seeing the path forward, and I don't think Plan Commission has any authority to authorize funds for a plaque or require, the owner. I mean, someone would have to step forward. Are you aware of any groups or even city funding that might make this a possibility?
I am not aware at this time. I recently found out about this, but I am committed to finding the funds for either a plaque or gathering together the interested stakeholders into renovating this property. So one or the other, I am committed, and I have talked to several people in the Black community who are also committed for not only this property, but are committed for the Hills grocery store also.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Heck. Go ahead.
Thank you. I have a question for Greg Worth, the applicant.
Okay, Greg. Go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, thank you. Greg, as you know, when Plan Commission makes decisions about demolition applications, we don't consider the future use of the property. So my question is not related to your ideas about what you might do with the property in reality, but it's a hypothetical. I mean, you have a lot of experience, from what I understand, in renovating older buildings, and I'm interested to know, if you had $1 million, I'm just going to pull that number out of a hat, a large number. Do you think you could reconstruct the foundation and utilize some portions of this building to construct a maybe replica that included some of the original materials? I mean, I'm trying to get an idea of how much would this might cost if we were to. I mean, from what I've seen, and you've documented it quite well, it's really a disaster. And I'm kind of interested if you have any idea what it might cost.
Wonderful. Thanks, Alderman Heck. Yes. So the reality is, and I've kept my eyes open, and I have personally reached out to dozens and dozens of not only the people who have spoken tonight, but other community leaders, fellow house restoration professionals, potential purchasers, potential financiers, and community groups. I would gather there are at least 100 people who are familiar with and are concerned with this matter. And I'd hoped that at some point over the past 5 months, they would discover a solution that I was overlooking, but not a single person has come to a solution that would allow me to proceed without a demolition permit. I'll say that if Jeff Bezos wrote me an unlimited check and said, "Save this house, Greg," due to my conflict with building and safety and health codes, I would still have to be here tonight with $1 trillion in my pocket requesting a demolition permit, simply because I have to remove and reconstruct the facade and over 50% of the exterior walls of the structure. So, to that end, a demolition permit is absolutely required to proceed with this. But back to your other question about what can be saved, it is my intention, and I already have some rough drafts, and I believe I showed Kurt Stiege at some point what I had drawn. It is my intention to replace this building with one that pays homage to it in every way possible. It will have the same roof pitches. It will have the same window layout. It will have the same sized porch on the front, and you could almost walk. You could run past it quickly and glance over your shoulder and think that you were looking at the same house that stood here the other day. It will be a bit taller because the existing house does not meet code for height of joists or height of ceilings, and it will be a little bit skinnier because as I need space to construct a house, I will need to make the house a bit skinnier in order to proceed with any kind of construction.
Greg, I'm going to interrupt
forward.
you. I'm going to interrupt you briefly because you're kind of drifting into territory that's not really something that we're supposed to consider when we're talking about demolition permits. But that said, the initial part of your answer was super informative. So let me make sure I understand that. I'm going to restate it my way, that even if you were to gather folks who are very interested in preserving this house and also the adjacent two structures, you feel like a demolition permit will still be necessary because of the scale of the work that would need to be done. Would you estimate that there is some percentage of the original materials or structure that could be saved if that relatively unlimited source of funding were available? Or do you feel like it's really would need to be more of an homage to the original structure, or could some of it be saved, in your opinion?
Yeah, it would only ever end up as a homage to the original structure. I did do the math with a tape measure. The exact number is 76.3% of exterior walls need to be completely reconstructed, and that includes the facade, which I will quote a portion of the zoning code in regard to demolition, that an act that destroys an existing building wall facing a public street or deconstructs or destroys 50% or more of the exterior walls of the building. So the 76% that I need to replace puts me well beyond the minimum requirements that I require a demolition permit for.
I understand. Okay.
Yep.
And then one other question, although this isn't related to the zoning code, the foundation would need to be somehow totally replaced. Is that the case, or can it be reused if the upper part of the house is reconstructed?
So the foundation on this building is very unique in that this house was moved to this location, and I don't know whether they telegrammed or wrote a letter ahead of time, but the people who constructed the foundation for the house that was being delivered built it to the wrong dimensions. So when the house showed up in 1923, a bunch of stonemasons had to jump back in the hole and remove the upper 5 courses of block wall out to make it fit the house, which in turn led to the house. I guess if you read my report, you know this, but essentially the house is not bearing on the foundation as it currently stands, nor has it since it was moved to this location. So when I first purchased the house, it was fairly obvious that the foundation would need some replacement, and I have confirmed that the entire foundation would need to be replaced no matter what happens going forward. But at the time, I had assumed there was a structure of structural significance above the foundation, which turned out to not be the case. So yes, the foundation would have to be completely replaced.
Okay. All right. I think those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Heck. Commissioner Spencer.
Thanks. I just had one minor question because Commissioner Fernandez and Heck did a good job of asking other ones I was interested in. Thank you for that. It looked to me, and actually, this is for either Kurt or Bob, if they're both on the call, either one, if you know. It looked to me like a part of the front porch had been cut off at one point to accommodate the building next door. Can you confirm that, or did I see wrong on that picture?
This is Kurt Steggy. I'm not aware of part of the front porch having been taken off. I think Greg would, to tell you the truth, Greg is in a better position to answer that than I am.
Okay.
Okay, Greg, can you respond?
Yes, I've looked over every document I've ever found on this house, and the earliest picture I could find was perhaps, maybe Kurt helped me find it, maybe from the 60s or something, but the porch it appears that the porch has always stood in its location at its current size.
Okay. Maybe it was must be an optical illusion because it's so close to that next building. And I was just wondering how that. Yeah, and I'm sorry. I wish I had brought up the picture. It was a picture, I think, when the building had been moved. Or a little bit later, but that's fine. I was just curious that if it had been adjusted at all, how that happened and how it got the permits to do that. That's my only question for now. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question for Greg. The original part of the structure, it looks like there's been some additions. Can you describe on maybe this photo the additions? I'm assuming the ones to the rear of the main two-story structure are mostly additions.
Yeah. If we could go to slide 1, please. Might be a better way to talk about it. So slide 1, I am standing in the 4th addition to the building, looking into the 3rd addition of the building, which you can see, I guess it was the kitchen, and you can see that it's about a foot lower than the remainder of the house. And then at the far end of the building would be the original home. The original home is the 2-story structure, and I would say that's roughly 500 square feet. And then there's another addition to the right. So there have been between 4 and 5 additions, plus a rear deck added to the main building during this time, and every single addition was added without thought of structural design. So unfortunately, there are no saving graces in the original structure nor the additions that followed.
Okay, thank you. And I have one question for Kurt. Are there any tax credits, state or federal tax credits, that would be available to the owner of this property for the renovation of it?
As a contributing building to a national historic district, yes, there would be both state and federal benefits. The specific amounts I should know, but they can be significant. How they actually translate to this structure, I can't tell you.
Does it have to be an income-producing property? No, it can just be a owner single-family home.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then I guess a follow-up question with Greg. Have you sought out any of the potential credits, tax credits from the state or federal government on this property?
Yes, I have, and I hate to disagree with Kurt, but it does have to be, in my understanding, a income producing property for, I guess I won't make up a year amount, but I believe it was 10 years following. And I would be a house that wasn't in this condition, but in this location and of this vintage would be open to 20% federal and 20% state tax credit. But that would be for, I read every single word of the entire website that pertains to this. Okay. And almost nothing on it actually pertains to this structure, given that so much has already been modified and replaced, everything from the windows to things like that. And also, yeah, I guess beyond the fact that I can't do anything with this property without a demolition permit, it was of no benefit to me.
Okay.
Was my finding.
Okay, thank you. Alder Heck.
Thank you. Just a point of information. As somebody who has utilized the historic tax credits for residential buildings, I know that that credit is 25%, but it applies only to the exterior of residential structures, and even can apply to non-original features in the building. It depends. It can also apply to HVAC. But I'd like to ask, if I may, Bob Kleva, who testified earlier, who I also know has a fair amount of experience with historic tax credits, if he knows more details.
Okay, Bob.
Yeah, thank you, Alder Heck. It does get very complicated, but it is 25% that is available for residential structures. If the property is commercial, it gets a little more complicated and drops down to 20% that can be capitalized. But residential's more advantageous because 25% of the qualified rehabilitation expenses can be capitalized. And as Alder Heck mentioned, it does include mechanicals, surprisingly. So HVAC, electrical, plumbing, structural work on the house. So it's more than what one sees from the exterior. And as long as the building is in a historic district, it doesn't have to be landmarked, and it automatically qualifies. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bob. That last discussion may be a little bit off topic, but I think it's at least provides some additional information for the commission. So are there any other questions for any of the registrants? Seeing none, I'm going to then close the public hearing. Are there questions for staff? Yes, Commissioner Shepard, go ahead.
Yeah, question for staff for Chris. And some of this we've already sort of talked about, but I want to get, once again, your take on this. So now that this property has come to everyone's attention, now that this is on the radar, what happens, again, in your report, you mentioned the possibility of placing this application on file without prejudice. But if that were to occur, what would happen after that? For example, would the applicant work with the alder? Would they work with, once again, the neighborhood organization? What do you see could possibly happen, again, sort of in the interim?
I believe if it's placed on file without prejudice, that they can submit in 6 months. And I mean, certainly, I think all of the options that have been brought up today, whether it's networking, contacting, Alder Carter.
Chris, you're kind of muffled. Can you turn up your volume, maybe?
Is that better?
A little bit better.
I'll try and speak loud.
Okay.
Certainly, there are all of the options that have been presented and discussed this evening, it just sets the placing it on file without prejudice. It just sets the time frame. I believe it's 6 months that they would not be able to submit before, but certainly in that time, applying for the historic tax credits, working with the historic trust and Alder Carter and all of her contacts. So they just would not be able to pull the demolition permit until getting approval from the Plan Commission. So you could place it on file, or you could refer it if I don't see a lot of benefit, because there are so many things that need to be determined, and that may not be the best decision, but there are a lot of options moving forward to for the applicant to follow up with.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Any follow-up questions, Commissioner Shepard? Seeing none.
No.
Commissioner Fernandez.
Thank you. Chris, I wanted to just ask you, because I didn't quite understand. You said that it would not be beneficial to place it on, to refer it to a specific meeting because there are too many questions to be answered. Is that what you said? Right at the end of what you were...
Heather, do you have a reply? Would you like to reply, Heather?
I'm having trouble hearing Chris, and so I want to try to respond to that too. So one option would be to place it on file without prejudice, and that allows for the applicant to bring it back with new information at any time. They could bring it back to the Plan Commission, anytime in the coming months. If it's simply placed on file, then it can't be. This application can't come before you for another year, and so that adds a time limitation to it. If the Plan Commission were to decide to refer this matter, the Plan Commission would want to have key items that they're actually requesting to learn more about. So what pieces of information don't you have that you would need at a future meeting to provide that rationale for referral? And so I think Chris was saying that's a possibility here. If the Plan Commission thinks that there's more information needed, that would perhaps warrant consideration of a referral. But if you have the information you need, but still want to leave the door open for this applicant or a future property owner to come back in at any time with a revised application, an appropriate motion would be to place it on file without prejudice.
Commissioner Fernandez, is that a question?
Thank you, it does. And now another question for staff, probably for Heather. If we were to approve the demolition and wish to place some sort of an amendment on that to the effect that there will be photographic documentation of it, a plaque erected, is that even possible? When we don't, who would we be making that requirement of is, I guess, my question. We can't require the city to do that.
Sure. It's a bit of new territory for us under the new demolition ordinance, but I would say as the planning division director, I would feel comfortable with a condition like that placed on the applicant. I think that the safest way to go about it may be to even reopen the hearing and ask the applicant if that's something they would be comfortable agreeing to. My guess is that they would not be concerned about such a condition, but I would leave that to them.
Thank you. Chair Cantrell, I would be appreciative if you would be willing to do that, and we can ask the applicant.
Sure. If it's okay with all the commission members, I would open the hearing and ask Gregory, would you be willing to do photo documentation and prepare a plaque describing the importance of this structure to the city of Madison and the Black community?
I would, of course, be happy and willing to put such a plaque on or in front of the building. And when I purchased this house from the Hill family, They told me specifically that they understood that it might be replaced with an apartment building or something of the sort, and they asked me at that time that I were to put a plaque on the building that I replace this with. So I have already committed to doing such a thing, and I am happy to recommit to doing that now. And what was the other part?
I think photo documentation and the plaque as well.
And photo documentation, I guess I've already provided quite a bit of that. I'm not sure if we want, I don't know if I have photos that you would want to remember the house by.
I think that working with the Madison Trust, they could probably give you and city staff an idea, and the landmarks preservation planner, what photo documentation would be, what would be required.
Yeah, and that would be wonderful. And I know that there is some pictures of the house and its former glory somewhere, and I don't know where I would put it, but I'd be happy to include that in part of the story of this building.
Thank you. Commissioner Fernandez, does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Heck.
Thank you. This is for Heather or Chris. Two questions. First, the easy one. When an item is placed on file without prejudice, we've heard that really at any time they can come back if they feel like there's some substantial difference between what they were proposing originally. Do they have to pay an application fee again, or is it the same application?
They do need to pay another application fee.
And do you know how much that is?
I'll look at Chris here. I think it's in the realm of $500.
600.
600.
600. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Second, more complicated question. If this item were to be placed on file without prejudice, and let's say there was a great organizing effort and fundraising and a more community-based effort came forward to try to save this particular house, we've heard that it would still likely need a demolition. There's really not a path forward for not demolishing it in the technical sense, not necessarily 100% demolish, but that, in other words, the application would morph quite a bit, I assume, because it wouldn't be for a total demolition, which is what the applicant is thinking. That could still be the same item with a new application, and there wouldn't be any problem there, right? If you know what I'm asking.
Heather, Chris? Okay.
I would have to look at the all of the conditions from the reviewing agencies, but I'm not, well, I guess if it's just the front facade, say, then they wouldn't be touching the utilities and whatnot. That it might change some of the comments from city engineering, but if I think you said 76.3% of the exterior walls earlier, likely it's hard to say what conditions would apply and whether it would have to go all the way back through reviewing agencies. It likely would. Yeah, it's hard.
There's no problem with that because of the fact they're paying the application fee again, which sort of subsidizes some of those looks at an app. Okay, so it would kind of be a reboot at that point. Okay, and that wouldn't be a procedural problem, is kind of what I was getting at.
No.
All right, thank you.
Are there any other questions for city staff? And I'll close the hearing that I reopened, so the hearing's closed now. Seeing no raised hands, I would be looking for a motion here. Commissioner Shepard.
Sure. I would move that the Plan Commission concur with the findings of the Landmarks Commission and find that the demolition permit approval standards 4 and 7 are not met, and that the Plan Commission place this item on file without prejudice.
Do we have a second to the motion? Second by Commissioner Heck. Do we have discussion to the motion? Commissioner Shepard, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, I think that placing this application on file without prejudice is probably the most humane thing that we can do. It will allow additional time for the applicant, for elected officials, once again, those in the city and others, public and private, a chance to work together and to see if we can, once again, if the property can be restored, then fantastic, that would be great. If ultimately it's determined that it cannot be saved, that demolition has to take place, then so be it. But I think additional time and additional research and maybe a few more eyeballs on the site to look at it would be helpful. I also think it would be helpful for the applicant. Along the way, he may be able to find some additional, once again, tax savings, some additional funding that either one, again, would help to restore the property and once again, keep the property, make it, once again, habitable and that sort. But also if the building has to be demoed, then there may be, again, also additional funding and resources there to help rebuild, and also, again, to make sure that the property is identified as that its historic significance is recognized at the site. So I would think that the applicant, like anyone else, would like to sort of move on with these projects, but I think a little additional time and resources could prove beneficial for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Heck, would you like to comment? Yes, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Shepard said it very well. Honestly, because of the discussion that we had, it's pretty clear this is coming back one way or another. And it may be that, we'll find eventually that the demolition standards are met, but I do think the motion is appropriate. When we look at the statement of purpose of the zoning code that we're considering with regard to demolitions, there is this section in the statement of purpose that says, we should protect the public from potentially unsafe structures and public nuisances, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's going to come into play, and it's a little bit of a subjective decision, but that's inevitable. We use our experiences to inform our decisions. I do think we will be dealing with this, and I really think that, yes, the applicant needs to learn more about what all the options are, even though I think he's done a tremendous job already in trying to save this. But it's really about the community to a greater extent. I live across the street from this building and the Hill Grocery, and for years the family has advocated for and started a little nonprofit. They've come to neighborhood events and tried to get folks interested in raising money, and to no avail. It really hasn't gained any momentum. I mean, it may be this, I hope, is the spark that starts that process, but the community and the city both need to rally behind this if we're going to reach a different conclusion when this comes back. Thanks.
Thank you, Alder Heck. Anyone else wishing to speak? Yes, Commissioner Fernandez.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say that I appreciate Alder Heck's comments very much. I'm going to support this motion, but my strong belief is that the ultimate solution here is going to have more to do with recognizing the historic importance and preserving it in some form of historical document or plaque. And I'm not certain exactly how the applicant brings it back with that. I mean, because the applicant has already said that they would do that. So it seems like we're asking the applicant to come back with something other than preserving the historic value through some, I'm not quite sure what the term for it is, but documentation and public presentation of it in a plaque. So I guess, I don't know, maybe I'm done talking. I'm going to support this motion because it certainly buys time, and in the worst case, we will have to make this decision again. And I would love to see every opportunity to come up with the best possible solution on the part of the community and the city to preserve at least the historic value, if not the building itself. But I do tend to believe that ultimately we may end up not being able to avoid the demolition of this building from what I'm
Thank you, Commissioner Fernandez. Commissioner Shepherd, would you like to speak again?
Yeah, just a quick follow-up on
Sure.
that. And I think Commissioner Fernandez, there's a lot of truth in terms of what you're saying, but I also feel that just based on the standard and the fact that we received a letter from the Landmarks Commission, which again addresses standard number 4. It means that there's still questions out there in terms of being able to clearly, once again, identify and meet the standards and that sort. So and again, the standards lay this out, that if we receive a report from the Landmarks Commission, we have to weigh that as significant. And ultimately, it may end up exactly where Commissioner Fernandez, where you mentioned it may end up. But I think with the Landmarks Commission report, I think we need to once again place it on file without prejudice. And again, hopefully the applicant can gain some additional benefit from some additional time to do research and get others hopefully once again involved in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Shepherd. Any other? I have a couple of comments. I agree with the motion. I do agree that we're likely to see this back because obviously if over 75% of the building has to be demolished because of structural issues, we're going to see it. But I think this gives us some time, not only for the Alder Carter, maybe a coalition of people that she can bring to the table, the Madison Trust, the Neighborhood Association, and maybe even city staff. I think there are potentially funding sources out there that could address some of this. I think even potential TIF dollars, because we have some TIF districts on East Washington. And I know that at least the TIF law allows TIF spending within a half a mile of the boundary of the TIF districts. So that there may be, obviously, the Economic Development Director would have to, review that, but there may be some sources out there that we haven't thought about that might be possible to tap. So, but again, I'm going to support the motion here. Anyone else? Seeing none, I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand. Seeing no raised hands, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Good discussion here. The next item of business is business by members. Are there any business by? Oh, Alder Carter, would you like to comment? Go ahead. Oh, Go ahead, Alder.
First of all, it's so good to see all of you, but I had two other things on the agenda.
Okay.
I came in late, so I don't know, were they on the consent?
Yes.
Item 6 and item 8?
Yes, they were all on the consent and they were
Okay.
approved.
Okay, well then I'll say good night.
Good night, Alder Carter. Good to see you.
You too.
Business by members. Are there any individuals on the commission have any business? Seeing no raised hands, no business here. Secretary's report. Heather, do you have a report? Looks like a long one.
Ooh, I know. I'll pick the heavy hitters. Thank you, Brad, and thank you for chairing the last few meetings. Greatly appreciated. At our next meeting on May 23rd, we will first have the election of the chair and vice chair, as well as appointments to the Transportation Planning and Policy Board and Joint Campus Area Committee. I wanted to mention also that we'll be joined by a new member, Gabe Mendez will be joining the Plan Commission pending approval by the council tomorrow evening. So that will be Gabe's first meeting. And I was wrong last time. Alder Lemmer will be joining us for one more meeting on May 23rd. She's literally on an airplane right now, was unable to make it, but she'll be joining for her last meeting on the 23rd. Moving forward on the 23rd, two zoning text amendments. One is a simple error fix when the city redid the zoning ordinances to make it easier to construct housing as a permitted use. There was an error made to one of the motions that had been made on the floor by the council, and this is a fix to the traditional residential urban 2 district to fix that error. And then also, some alders have sponsored an amendment to the zoning code that would remove the ability for residents to put forth protest petitions. And what a protest petition does, this always lands at the council and not in front of you. But for rezonings, a protest petition is something that's done by a group of area residents around a subject site that necessitates a 3/4 vote of the Common Council to approve a rezoning following action by the Plan Commission or recommendation by the Plan Commission. The change that will be before you for discussion on May 23rd is the removal of that provision, but also a change that across the board, any rezoning in the city would require a 2/3 favorable vote by the Common Council. And so I expect a decent discussion on that item. And then I'll also mention 616 East Mifflin and 609 East Dayton Street, demolition and conditional use for a new 55-room hotel on the Near East Side. And then moving forward to the June 13th meeting, first of all, I will need to miss this meeting. So Kevin Furco will be staffing this on June 13th. And it's a fairly heavy meeting as things have turned out and been referred to this meeting. First, we have the return of the 200 block of East Olin Avenue, a new 12-story mixed-use building. This is the one that was next to the Wonder Bar site, and it does not involve a relocation or demolition of the Wonder Bar in this iteration. Also, on the 3900 block of Monona Drive, right where it meets Cottage Grove Road, this is a revised request involving a rezoning to the traditional shopping street district for a new mixed-use building with 69 housing units. I think the others I'll mention, there are three somewhat related items returning to the Plan Commission related to the Oscar Meyer Special Area Plan on and close to the former Hartmeyer site. The district alder has sponsored a collection of substitutes that change the street alignments and associated rezonings, and those necessarily need to be referred back to Plan Commission for another recommendation. And so we'll have those back before you. And I think that's where I'll leave it for this evening. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Heather. Any announcements by the commission? Seeing no raised hands, adjournment. I'll be happy to see Commissioner Zeller's back. So, but do we have a motion to adjourn? Motion by Commissioner Shepard. Do we have a second to the motion to adjourn? Second by Commissioner Fernandez. I'm going to assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand. Got that down now. Seeing no raised hands, Commissioner Shepherd put down that hand. So thank you. Motion carries. Good night, all.